Shabbat Shalom, everyone. For the last few weeks, I have planned these sermons to talk about different texts and things that were on my mind, and then sadly, events happen in the world that derail those plans, and I feel compelled to talk about those events because they are indeed important for us to unpack. In 2019, before COVID, when anti-Semitism was on a significant rise, I stood on this bema and I shared with the congregation that I believed that there were three forms of anti-Semitism, that was rearing its ugly head in our world. One I referred to as Yahoo, Ku Klux Klan anti-Semitism, good old-fashioned Jew hatred. The second one I referred to was juvenile anti-Semitism. And the third one I referred to was anti-Zionism, which indeed is anti-Semitism. And what I said at that time was that the Yahoo Ku Klux Klan version were white nationalists who hate Jews, the people who marched in Charlottesville who said they will not replace us, people who in days of old would put little dunce-looking caps over their faces, but today they don't hide their faces. And their hatred of Jews is matched with their hatred of blacks, Asians, immigrants, homosexuals, and others. Juvenile anti-Semitism was an entire generation of young people. And by young, I mean 8 to 25, who never learned the impact that hatred has in the world. There were cases here in Bergen County at Dwight Englewood School with some kids who were 14 years old who were up to some hooliganism. And what they decided to do at 14 years old was they took some shaving cream and spray paint and they drew swastikas on different people's driveways. Now, that's a case where the parenting clearly has failed and education clearly failed. But these kids never learned the potency of what a swastika means to Jews. And it is tantamount to what a noose means to black people. And it was rampant. Uneducated people in society, rampant. Behaving and talking in a way without facts, figures, or understanding. And then the third form of anti-Semitism that I had spoken about in 2019 was anti-Zionism, which indeed is anti-Semitism. It was people who were born and raised third, fourth, fifth generation from Kuwait, from Iraq, from Saudi Arabia, from Syria, from Yemen, perhaps even the Emirates, Bahrain, all of the Middle East, Libya, Egypt. And many of them, some who were wealthy and some who were not, moved to Western Europe. And they moved to Western Europe for a different life, a better life, and more freedoms. But for years and for generations, they were indoctrinated that Jews are bad. It was literally in their school books that Jews were pigs, Jews were dogs, and in their society, pigs were a defilement. Dogs were things you can't have. It actually said in many of these children's books that these people learned math in, for example, if you shoot 5 Jews and then you shoot 3 more Jews, how many Jews have you killed? When our books say, if Tom has 4 apples and Sarah has 6 apples, how many apples do they have together? This was how they learned for generation after generation, in conversations in the living room and in the kitchen. And then when they came to the Western world and they had their first interaction with Jews ever, because don't forget, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in Oman, in Bahrain, in the Emirates, in Libya, and in Egypt, these places have been Judenrein, free of Jews since 1948 in the establishment of the state, when all the Jews were kicked out of these countries. So they came to these places, and when you see of growing anti-Semitism, In Western Europe, the majority of what you see is indeed that form of anti-Semitism. So why am I recalling with you my sermon from 2019? Well, in the last few years, we have had a spike, a huge surge in Jew hatred and even Jew targeting. And three examples that come to mind of Jews that have been targeted have fit all of these three paradigms. The shooter in Pittsburgh was someone who fit into that Yahoo Ku Klux Klan version of hatred. He was afraid of immigration and knew that the synagogue was hosting an immigration Shabbat. And he said, we must stop them from bringing all of the infidels into the country and from Jews growing. So he came into a synagogue early on a Saturday morning and killed mostly elderly in the crowd. He fits in the category of white nationalist. And then a couple weeks ago, we had someone who killed 2 people walking out of an AJC event. He didn't know that they worked for the embassy. He didn't know that they were soon to be engaged. He just knew they were Jews leaving an event from the Jewish Museum, and he targeted them, shot them, unloaded the magazine of his gun, and killed them both in cold blood. And then came in and started yelling, "Free, free Palestine." Now, while this man is an older man and not a child, his lack of basic facts and information puts him in the unequivocal category of juvenile anti-Semitism. Free, free Palestine? The irony is the only free Palestinians in the world are the ones that live in Israel. This is an uninformed, ill-informed, naive human being who doesn't know 2 shreds of facts to put together. And because of it, that anti-Semitism, again, led to death. And then Sunday afternoon, in Boulder, Colorado, an Egyptian illegal alien named Mohammed Solomon once again burned Jews. And he didn't do it because he was a white nationalist, because let me tell you what, white nationalists despise him as much as they despise Jews and other ethnicities. He didn't do it because he was juvenile or didn't understand the decades-long history of the Palestinian plight and the narrative with Israel and the Palestinians. He did it because he had been indoctrinated for year after year as an Egyptian dissident, that the plight of Egyptians and the plight of the Palestinians is the result of the Israeli. So he set them ablaze with Molotov cocktails and a makeshift flamethrower. And here we are again, where that level of anti-Semitism, just 5, almost 6 years later, has risen to such a dangerous level that we're not just walking around talking about rhetoric. We are fearful for our lives. I have a conference soon. I'm leaving it at that. I'm not saying any more about the conference. I'm not telling you where it is, who's hosting the conference, or what it's about. But we were specifically told in a briefing that we are not allowed to put on any social media or share in emails or with anyone when we're traveling where we're going, why we're going, or what we're going for. We were even encouraged as Jewish men to wear hats instead of yarmulkes when traveling to this conference. We were also told that we shouldn't use cabs and that specific car services will be done for us instead of Ubers out of our own safety. This is in a major city in the United States of America. Now, while I'm incredibly appreciative of all of the precautions that this organization has taken, This is absurd, but required. And when I think about the future of our temple, which is something I think about more often than you would believe, one of the things that existentially has me up at night is how much money we are spending on security at this temple. I predict in the next 3 years, 20% of our budget will be on security. And that's a blessing and a curse for us. The curse is we have close to a $4 million budget at this temple, and any of you who can do math know what 20% of that is. The blessing part is, thank God this shul can afford it. But what do synagogues across the street, or who aren't as blessed as us, do? They're just as much a legitimate target as we are. What are we supposed to do now? What is our response supposed to be? It seems to me that it doesn't really matter which way we turn, but Jews are being targeted. In one direction, we're targeted by old-fashioned hatred that is hundreds of years old, dates back to the Klan, and is still around today. We turn in another direction and we have juvenile hatred that is being fed from misinformation, social media, and the general media that is giving wrong, baseless, non-factual information that is leading to the death of human beings. And then we go in another direction and we have anti-Zionism that is anti-Semitism, and it is killing Jews. Whichever direction we go, up, down, right, left, we are indeed in the crosshairs. And it is never felt more lonely. I want to share 3 things with you related to this. 1 is an observation, and 2, I think, is a remedy. The first is the observation that was wildly painful to me. How many of you followed the news of this terrible bombing over the last week, the firebombing and the makeshift Molotov cocktail in Boulder? Raise your hands if you followed this story. Who here heard in the news them refer to the peaceful demonstrators as supporters of Israel? Raise your hand. Who here heard them referred to as some Holocaust survivors? Who heard them as synagogue members? Who heard them as Jews? Who heard them as members of the Jewish community? Okay. Who heard them referred to as Americans? Neither did I. Not once. These people who were targeted were all Americans. And you know what else? So was Sarah Milgram, who was shot outside the Washington, D.C. Jewish Museum. So were all of those people killed inside the Tree of Life Synagogue. They were Americans. But the minute that we start to categorize them as Jews or as Zionists or as Israel supporters or members of a particular temple and not Americans, we are beginning to feed the problem that we are not part of the general society, that we are other. And I think that's one of the first things we need to rise up and show the world and the media. Because we know how the world responded when there was an attack on America, whether it was Pearl Harbor, or whether it was the USS Cole, or whether it was the World Trade Center. Why isn't this attack on America? Here's the second thing I noticed that's been painful. Do any of you remember Cornell University in the height of the post-October 7th tragedies that were happening within 50 days after October 7th, when a particular student who was at the time unnamed said that we're going to take all of the Jews and we're going to rape them and then kill them. We're going to take them to the cliff, the famous cliff at Cornell, and we're going to throw them all off, to the point where Jews were locked in their dorm rooms and they couldn't go to the Jewish or kosher dining hall to eat, or even the regular dining hall or library. They were afraid to go. They were holed up for more than 18 hours. Do you remember that moment? I do too. Let me tell you what I think the most criminal part of that episode was. It was bad that there were people out there who hated Jews and expressed it in such a violent way. As a historian, that's happened since the beginning of our existence, and I don't think that's evaporating. Let me tell you the part that pained me the most in that story. I didn't read, and I did a lot of research on this because I wrote a book related to this stuff. I didn't read one instance of one non-Jewish student who knocked on the dorm room door of one Jewish student who maybe they were friends with, maybe they weren't, maybe they were down the hall, maybe they were in a different place, who would have knocked on the door and said, "Sarah, I'm in your chem class. I think what's happening is horrible, and I want to walk with you to the dining hall or to the library. Because if they're going to hurt you, they're going to have to hurt me first." Not one instance. I think that most of those people who were in the chem classes together, most of them were bothered by the Jew hatred that was happening on campus. They weren't excited by it, most of them. But none of them either learned in school or through life to have the courage to knock on the door of the person who is being oppressed and say, "I'll walk with you. I'll protect you. You'll be okay with me." Now, I'm not saying Jews are perfect, but we have a history of doing that. We have a history of doing that in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and if you don't believe me, you can ask Kirshner and Goodman, who rode in the freedom marches to help register voters with John Cheney, and they lost their life for it. You can ask the like of Harvey Milk, who had many of straight men who marched with him to help in the fight for equality for people who were openly gay. But the rest of the community has crickets, quiet, when we're waiting for them to knock on that proverbial door. To me, that was the biggest crime that happened in the wake of the episode at Cornell and at so many other universities. I want to close with a story that happened to me last week. Many of you know that I wrote a book related to Israel. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and if you use this code, you get 20%. No, I'm just kidding. I never in my wildest dreams ever thought I would write any book, yet alone two in an 18-month period. And I learned a lot about publishing in this time. And one of the things I learned is that there are many, many, many people that prey on book writers. They call incessantly and they have some recipe that's going to help you promote your book. All of a sudden, 100 people or 1,000 people are going to buy it. And most of the people who are writing these books fall for them. I can get it in front of these many people, and they get excited because they think, oh, the returns will be quite lucrative. Many of them try to make an income from this. In my case, all the proceeds of the book went to help people who are suffering from PTSD in Israel. So it was a win for them, not a win for me. And after a few months of this, I realized what they all do. But incessantly, the calls come through. They just come 6, 7, 8 times a day trying to promote the book. And the book has been out for well over a year, but the calls still come. And last week, I got one of those calls. Again, I get them all the time. And the woman said, "Hi, I'm calling from this book publisher, and we want to promote your book. It's about Israel, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Listen, enough with the calls. Your company has called me 7 times. I'm not interested in promoting this book any more than the natural avenues that have happened. So please, please take me off of your lists. Put me on your do not call list. Don't call anymore. You're wasting your energy. I said almost those exact words in this exact tone. And the person on the phone said, I'll take you off the list if you could just answer one question for me. I said, sure, I'll answer the question. What is it? Big pause. She said, do you believe in Palestine? I said, yeah, I do believe in Palestine. She goes, you do? I said, yes, I believe in Palestine. She goes, good, free Palestine, and then hung up the phone on me. And I was caught off guard, not what I expected from someone trying to promote a book on Israel. So I did something that I've never done before. I looked at the caller ID and I called her back. And she answered the phone. She said, hello? I said, I have a question for you. She goes, who is this? I said, I'm the author of the book that you just called about. I said, do you believe in Israel? And she said, no. I said, well, you asked me if I believe in Palestine, and I do, and I've advocated for a Palestinian state for a very long time and for equal rights for Palestinians for an incredibly long time. But if I ask you if you believe that the Jews have a right to a Jewish state, your immediate and instinctive answer is no, which tells me that you're a Jew hater. She goes, that's not true. I said, you are. You're a racist Jew hater. And the problem with most of you people is you have no idea what you're even hating. You just hate Jews. She goes, you're killing babies. I said, we have never killed babies. We don't kill babies. You're the baby killer. You've killed babies way before October 7th in 1948, and all the babies that are dying in Gaza right now are a result of Hamas and the regime you're supporting. And you should be ashamed. You're a racist. You're a racist Jew hater. And all of a sudden, this woman started saying, I am not. I'm not a Jew hater. I'm not a racist. I said, yes, you are. Like a child, I just kept pushing her. You're a hater. You're a racist. You're a Jew hater. And she kept fighting back. And for the first time, I imagine in this entire narrative of this person's life, who I know nothing about, she was on defense. For the first time. I think one of the problems of the Jewish people facing anti-Semitism is that we are incredibly comfortable in the posture of victimhood. We've known it for a long time. Can you believe what's happening to us? Can you believe what the world is? Can you believe that the rabbi's going on a convention and he can't even tell anyone where he's going, why he's going, can't wear his yarmulke? Can you believe it? Yes, there is a moment in all of this that is kind of bewildering. And it catches us all off guard. And I get it. But I also think there's a time for all of us to put others on defense. And for us to pivot a little bit from the shock and awe that we're in to a place of pulling our punches a little less and telling others what they're doing wrong. To calling out the people who say, when there were marches for black people, I stood shoulder to shoulder with you even though I'm not black. When there was marches about Asian hate because of COVID, I used my voice even though there's nothing Asian in my DNA. When there's discrimination against openly homosexual people in our world, I want to stand up for equal rights even though I'm a straight man. And I think we need to tell our non-Jewish neighbors and friends not how disappointed we are, but that we need them. We need to tell them that we need them by our side in the literal and figurative marches that are happening, that it matters, and that their absence is noted, and it's noticed, and we've reached our level of tolerance. And the second thing we need to do is to start using our voice for all of these people who are raising these absolutely ludicrous, stupid, unfounded, unrealistic, and non-factual data and push back and call these things what they are. I contend we no longer use the word anti-Semitism. Most people don't even understand what it is. They don't know what a Semite is. They don't know what anti is. Just call it what it is. You're a Jew hater. And call it a word that most of these people would despise being labeled by. A racist. You're a racist. You're a Jew hater. When you put that title on them and they're on defense, at worst, it will cause them to pause. And at best, it will cause them to think about what they're doing and perhaps look inward. I don't think that this is the recipe to fix anti-Semitism in our world. Because as I started, it's coming in all directions. It's coming from the right, it's coming from the left, it's coming from those who hate Israel, and anywhere else in between. But our job is to use our pens, our voices, and our feet in action, not in awe. And to write to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, to all of the legacy media and let them know why weren't any of the victims referred to as Americans first? Because all of us pay taxes. All of us hang flags up on the 4th of July. All of us would defend our country if it were needed. We have to start being enlisted in that army if we want to move the needle. Because standing and saying, woe to us, is wildly ineffective. It doesn't move a needle. But we have to be wise, we have to be thoughtful, and we have to do this in some form of unity. I pray that all of those American victims in Boulder, who also were proudly Jewish, some who survived the Shoah, and all who were fighting for an unequivocal justice of bringing hostages who were stolen from sovereign land away from their homes so that they should come back and those that were killed can be buried. I pray that they all have a full recovery. And I pray that the next time we march, we look to our right and our left, and we see our non-Jewish neighbor by our side, and we feel their presence and hear their voice and feel that we're not alone. Because right now, we're all feeling very, very lonely. Shabbat shalom, everyone.